C'est une grande joie de vous accueillir, mesdames et messieurs, chers amis, madame l'ambassadrice de Grèce ici aux Pays-Bas, chère Katharina Ghini, nous sommes très honorés de votre présence parmi nous ce soir. Merci beaucoup, car c'est bien effectivement également la Grèce qui est à l'honneur ce soir. La Grèce qui a inspiré une grande artiste slave qui nous fait l'honneur de sa présence ce soir. Et grâce à vous, cher Stanislas COUZI-BETANCOURT, c'est une grande joie de vous accueillir dans notre établissement, l'Alliance Française de la Haye ce soir. Vous allez nous en dire plus. Je vous laisse nous décrire un peu le programme de la soirée pour les personnes qui nous ont fait l'honneur d'arriver aussitôt. Et puis ensuite, nous nous retrouverons ici après une itinérance dans notre bâtiment pour une table ronde pour aller plus loin.
Thank you so much for this really kind introduction. I'm very happy that you all came for this event. I like that, you know, we have this circle and it's going to be a very interesting conversation that we're going to have in a little bit. And of course, at the heart of this exhibition is this amazing project. We sent 2 paintings into space, one that Ekaterina painted, which is the painting of Persephone, and the other one of Christ, in order to reenact the ascension of both divine figures, and at the same time to show the similarities and the shared symbolism in both stories. Obviously, it's not identical, but when you look at the core of the message, it's very similar and pretty much the same. Elizabeth Skoglund, that unfortunately is not with us here today. And it's actually, I mean, it's a kind of synchronicity because Ekaterina and Elizabeth have exactly the same initials. And I mean, that's the smallest of the synchronicities that have happened. But in any case, Elizabeth unfortunately is not with us here, but she has a style that I really appreciate because she comes back to the old masters. And when we were conceptualizing the paintings of this exhibition together, we really communicated a lot about Velázquez, about Giotto. And I thought that for the painting of Christ, and especially by sending it to the edge of space, I thought it was quite an interesting process to actually have mixing something that is very, you know, classical, but making a fusion with something that is futuristic, such as sending, you know, the painting into space.
How do myths help humanity, as a general question? Well, let me ask the opposite. How can we live without mythos? In fact, we, to be true, to tell you the truth, Aristotle tells us we humans are rational creatures, and that distinguishes us from the rest of the animal world. So we are animals with reason. But though I hate to disagree with the great statuette Aristotle, you could as well say that humans are storytelling creatures, because that's what we do all day, and most of the stories that we tell each other are not really true, but somehow meaningful. Not literally true, but meaningful. Now, if I may give a very sensitive example of this, it's very sensitive, so I'm warning you. Namely, think of it, whether what you say is true, literally, or is it just meaningful? Not just is it meaningful. These two things are different. So, when I was young, that's a long time ago, people, when they loved each other, they used to say, I love you because you are special, you're so special. So, look at the word because that is what I want to point out here. If you say, I love you because you are so special, think of it, is that true? Obviously it's not. It cannot be. I mean, we are with 8 million people, and yeah, we resemble each other like raindrops, and would be very unlikely that you would love someone who would be somehow special. I mean, it's just the same. You could, if you want to say the truth, but you shouldn't do that, then you could say, I love you, or it's the other way around, because I love you, that's why you are special to me. It's the opposite. So you could say, in fact, you are very average. I could spit out of the window at 9 of you, but because I love you, that's what makes you, in my eyes, it's meaningful. Okay, so don't try that at home. But really, most of the stories that we tell each other have something meaningful. That's why we talk about it. Or if we go to movies, we read novels, but also everyday stories. We talk about things that touch the heart, and in many cases it's not really true. If you want to be really truthful, go to the sciences. Even there, they tell each other stories. And most of it is really not true in the strict sense, because if it's supposed to be true, you have to come up with proof, and that is really a very complicated thing. So even in the sciences, lots of narratives sneak in, and it's good to distinguish between what is a narrative and is meaningful, and what is really true, that's to say, which is really logically and empirically testable in the outside world. And these two things are not the same. So now the artist is the one who is a master or a female master in the realm of meaningfulness. And if we don't have art, no music, no good movies, no artist, then life is just dry, and we dry out, we can't live. So humans need meaningfulness, and because we need meaningfulness, we need myth. That is a meaningful story, and myths can be told in the form of a story, but also in the form of the visual arts, or anything that somehow makes an impression on us. And if we are really touched, then it might be that we dream about it or whatever. It is really something that we need as much as we need to breathe air or eat. We also need meaningfulness. So that's where the artist comes in. But people like me is just secondary. We just talk about it. That is very secondary.
No, I don't think it's secondary at all. I think it puts things into perspective, and I think you very clearly stated the purpose. I think sometimes it's necessary to have both approaches to actually have a thorough understanding of the process.
Thank you very much, Stanislas, and thank you so much, Professor, for enlightening the world of mythos. Surely I'm going to drag you into the world of the feminine. Obviously, Persephone here is the charming dancer of that myth that you can maybe tell us a little bit more about. But to me, the story that touched my heart the most and has shaped a little bit the course of my life is the story of Mary of Magdala. Mary of Magdala, who is the one who, in the story, again, how true is it or not? And when you were talking about truth, I remember when we quote Christ in the Bible, he always starts his sentence, in truth, I am telling you X, Y, and Z. That's how he speaks. En vérité, je vous le dis, and then he speaks. So why does he do that? That's a question to Professor that I would like to ask, because since you told us anything we say, the moment the logos is embodied, it becomes untrue. That's what you said. So why is it that him, who is supposed to be the logos embodied, et le verbe s'est fait chair, et il a habité parmi nous, and the word became flesh and inhabited amongst us, then he always starts his sentence as it is written. How true or not true is this? I mean, there was no direct reporter, taping what he was saying, but each time it's written, it always starts, in truth, I am telling you this. So anyway, when Christ dies and goes to the Hades of Persephone, he is killed, very much a political manslaughter to my mind. Then he comes back to humanity. How is he embodied or not, incarnated or not? Anyway, he comes back to Mary of Magdala. And she is the one, for me, she's the female figure who appears in the Gospels. That story touched me most because when Christ comes back, he asks her to go and say to everybody, I am back, I am resurrected from the dead. Okay, so he is a man, A lot of people believe the Son of God, others believe he's a prophet only. Anyway, but he talks to a woman in a time where patriarchy is dominant and you don't consider a woman capable even to listen, hear, receive a message, let alone to go and spread the message around. And the story that follows is that she's going to be pretty much crushed and erased and pushed aside and not being given the right place that she is entitled to have. And there is a gospel according to Mary of Magdala, as many of you know, but this gospel is not officially acknowledged by any church, nor is it proclaimed. But it exists, and I read it, and a lot of people here probably have read it, so it's very interesting for me, this story of a woman who is empowered by the creator, at least of a spiritual home called Christianity, has been so far, almost so far, completely downtrodden and not embraced by humanity. And I have felt it resonated with me very deeply, because we also name her the Apostle of the Apostles. And despite this, still women are not empowered in the leadership of any religion, including in Christianity. You don't have a woman popess, bishopess, or you start to have in the Anglican Church and some Protestant church, it's a beginning, but it's yet not a commonplace, you know. And it's absolutely not in Judaism, it's absolutely not in Islam, and it's absolutely not in even Buddhism. I challenged His Holiness Dalai Lama, whom I met on 2 occasions, because of the book I wrote on this very subject about the empowerment of women in the spiritual leadership. So that's why I'm very, very interested that you are comparing now Persephone with Christ, because I like to quote Romain Gary. Romain Gary said, Christ is the first man who spoke with the voice of a woman. So I find that very interesting because I feel the same. I think he came to advocate a message of love that is stronger than death, which is quite flabbergasting for humans, I think. So I think this is an incredible story. And for, I don't know if Mary of Magdala is a myth or if she's real historical character. If you came to my house, you would see dozens of books about Mary of Magdala. There are many, many theologians who have written about her, many women theologians who are trying to lead a kind of revolution, you know, within a lot of spiritual families, from Islam to Judaism to Buddhism to others. A lot of women, but that has been the case throughout the centuries, have advocated for the empowerment of women in spirituality. So that's why I'm so interested in the work of Ekaterina and the reading of Professor, because this is to me, this is the deepest story, right. And there's a big message for humanity to progress into evolution there.
One thing is, just as a parallel, I'm very interested in a comparable story, namely Jason and the Argonaut. Mm-hmm. He takes something from the other world, namely not only the Golden Fleece but also Medea. Mm-hmm. But the story has a bad ending for some reason. But indeed, Jesus Christ and Maria Magdalena could have been an ideal conjunctio oppositorum, could have been, but it has not happened in the past. And now we have Persephone and Christ going into heaven together, so that is a good compensation. But Jesus from Nazareth, the rabbi, that he indeed wanted to go really back to basics. What is important for humans, and I'm sure he was not discriminating against women or against enslaved people, etc., etc. However, as you know how Christianity came into being, and it took them a few hundred years to become the leading religion in the Roman Empire. So in the beginning, only a few people were followers, and I'm sure there were lots of them women, really lots of them. But later, the later church fathers made another selection of the stories, and they chose some stories about Jesus, biographies they chose to be canonical, the others were suppressed. They said, yeah, he has 12 disciples because of the 12 tribes of Israel, and obviously there were men. But that is because after a few hundred years, the women who had, the Christian women who had children, that's if you want to have a new religion, that's how you should do it. You should influence the women first, and if they have lots of children, and their daughters have lots of children, then this takes an enormous part of the population after a few generations. And people have done the calculation, and indeed, if you start with 1,000 people in the middle of the 1st century, and you do it like this, then it means that in the 4th century you have enough, a critical mass of people to become the leading religion, and this is what happened. And if it becomes a leading religion, then you need leaders. If you need leaders, that will be the people with testosterone, that is the men. And then all the rest is just wiped out, and this is what happened, especially thanks to St. Augustine, but also some other church fathers. So that is what happened, but there is another thing. Your first point was that Jesus of Nazareth, in the 4 biographies that differ slightly, the 4 Gospels, he says all the time, in truth I tell you. I think this is now going, you're not going to like it perhaps, but I think that if he says, in truth I tell you, I think, sorry to say so, but I think he should have said, the following that I'm saying is meaningful, not true, meaningful. But people use that word truth for something that they could have called meaningful. But if you mean truth in the sense of logically and empirically testable, according to some methodology, that is really very different. But he means, I think this is the most important thing, it's meaningful. And I think that a misunderstanding in Western society as such, this is really a sweeping statement, like 2,000 years of wrong Western approach is not to make this distinction. So they think what, if it is true, literally, then it is also, well, important and meaningful, as if that is the same. And I think that in mythology, pre-Christian, pre-Western, I'm a classical philologist, so I love mythology. I think that this is much better understood, especially in the Persephone myth, for example. Namely, the big difference, there are similarities, but the big difference between the 2 myths of Persephone and of Jesus Christ, myth in the sense of meaningful story, I'm not saying it didn't take place, but these are 2 narratives. And one narrative tells us about, indeed, a mother who lives with her daughter, or the daughter living with the mother, probably like mothers and daughters, and a daughter as well. That is, how do you say that? Everything is just harmonious and sweet, and the mother knows everything, and she's wise, and life can go on forever. However, that would be quite infertile, and life is not like that. Indeed, at some point, the feminine has to meet the masculine, and if it meets the masculine, it's going to be very primitive masculine. I mean, the masculine in the woman is very primitive because it's projection. So here it is Hades drawing her into the underworld and keeping her there by making her eating pomegranate seeds. And there she is. And the mother is now weeping and nothing is going on. And then they find a compromise. So half of the year, indeed, Persephone is with the mother, and life is good, and half of the year she's in the underworld. But that is the conjunctio oppositum. And now the point is, I think, the pre-Christian point is that is what makes life fertile and interesting. It's half underground, half above. And it has to be repeated. There's not really a point, final redemption. This is going on. This is a process. This is how things go. And I like that idea, also perhaps because I'm living in Maastricht, and that's also originally quite rural, agricultural. This is an agricultural myth. So we have this carnival myth, and if you live in Maastricht, officially, the patriarchal churches, lots of them in Maastricht, officially the patriarchal church is a masculine church, but in practice, not officially, who are these churches for? I checked it. It's like 1,450 churches and little chapels. And who are they for? All of them, really virtually all of them, are for the Holy Virgin Mother Mary. And there is the occasional church for Saint John Baptist or local saint or whatever, but the rest is all for the Holy Virgin. So in practice, in this rural area, for hundreds of years, nothing happened much. And people were just going to church, and in fact they worshipped the Holy Virgin Mother Mary. They could have worshipped perhaps Maria Magdalena, and so that is what people do, and it's not the same as what people sing.
Thank you so much for wonderful points, and because we are all women, of course, for us, most important story is kind of feminine story. And we're looking for goddesses, of course, because we have like some identity with these goddesses. So it was for me, of course, with Persephone, but also I'm looking at many religions in different cultures. And I see Freya, for example, he did the same experience. She was stuck in an underground by very brutal masculine power. And she was also goddess of love and beauty, and this has happened actually very much in a lot of mythology, and in the Middle East, and old feminine goddesses like Medusa, for example. She turned to be like a really monster, but she was not before. She was actually a very beautiful girl, but because of interconnection of the man, somehow she became a monster. So this is kind of interesting transformation, and this story is speaking very much to me. And yeah, and feminine aspect, of course, of it. Yeah.
I think what we're talking about in terms of spiritual leadership, one of the reasons why I think the myth of Persephone is very interesting, going back again to the Eleusinian mysteries, is because, as I was telling you at the beginning of this talk, the Eleusinian mysteries, they were one of the most important ritualistic tradition in the West, and it was, the leadership was held by women. They were priestesses. And they were, and when you see the initiations, and when you see the ancient art displaying the initiations at Eleusis, you see Persephone and Demeter, and they're very tall, they're like giants, and you see this very small man, and they were giving the wisdom, they were giving the essence of the mystery of life, in a way. I mean, again, this is what the mysteries of Eleusis were about, and this is also what religion is about, is understanding the mystery of life and death. And it's very interesting how there was this power shift that happened, going from the mysteries of Eleusis, who really, when you look at the text, for example, Cicero, great statesman, very powerful Roman senator, I think he was. He said the most important thing of the human race is the mysteries of Eleusis. If the mysteries of Eleusis were to be erased, humanity will be lost. And I think it's very interesting how, again, this very powerful man understood that the wisdom and the revelations of life and death came through the initiations held by priestesses. And it's very interesting how, again, you had this shift from the rituals at Eleusis to Christianity, and also with St. Augustine, when there was this idea that it was the men that needed to have the leadership in religion, and they had to be the masters and the owners of spiritual guidance. There is this thing that basically happened, which is the formerly priestesses, wise priestesses embodied by Persephone and Demeter that Ekaterina draws beautifully. They basically became the archetype of the witch in a way, so that the spiritual women basically became witch and ill-intentioned, and so that's where basically this was this shift of coming from this wise person that would tell you the mysteries of life and death, and then became this ill-intentioned person that actually is portrayed in a lot of stories, like the Baba Yaga, for instance, you know, and even though, I mean, obviously there's very interesting aspects in the transformation and the shadow and luminous aspects of the Baba Yaga, that of course, Ekaterina, you know much about.
Goddess of God, of death,
And nature.
yes, and racism, yes, and also circle, the same person, yes.
Exactly, but in a way, I mean, even though there's a lot of wisdom as well in those stories, you really see this cultural shift that happened, and categorizing the spiritual woman as grumpy, reclosed in nature, that you shouldn't approach, like that are not to be trusted. In Eleusis, and to finish on that point, in Eleusis, when the first time that I saw Hélène, and Hélène was, you were talking about spiritual leadership and the lack of female spiritual leadership in Christianity, I thought that this was extremely interesting, and especially that nowadays, I mean, in terms of equality of women and men, I mean, there's been huge progresses, and we see a lot of like female leaders in all kinds of sectors in business and in politics. But it's incredible that Christianity has not yet accepted that there needs to be a hierarchy of women as well, that should be, spiritual guides as well, that should have the legitimacy to be spiritual guides. So.
Yes, thank you so much, Stanislas. Later on, Christianity, also Islam and Judaism. I mean, you have figures emerging now with women imam, women rabbi, women, but they are still very much, alone. And but I just want to bounce on what you talked about women being witches. In this Alliance Française, we organized an exhibition on the myth of the women eternal witch, and there's this, a professor could tell us about the presence of witches here in the Netherlands, the fact that they have been sacrificed, a lot of women have been sacrificed and women slaughtered, if that word exists, here in the Netherlands, and that's a tradition to lay white flowers in different places in the Netherlands on a specific day, I think it's in November, on the places where women were sacrificed because of being accused of witchcraft. And again, it's very funny because I don't know how it sounds in English, but in French, when you talk about un sorcier, you have the recent Harry Potter story, un homme sorcier, a man who is empowered with witchcraft, is fantastic. You have Merlin l'Enchanteur, and you have all these figures of the man who is having spiritual power for the magic. That's always positive. And if it's a woman, it's a horrible witch. She's negative. It cannot be a glorious figure. So that would be interesting to have the feedback of you, Professor, on these myth stories. Each time the woman is empowered spiritually, she becomes a whore, even, you have Mary of Magdala was made into being a whore by the canon church, when she never absolutely was this, So how is it? We understand that there is a connection in between sexuality, sexuality and the spiritual power are mixed together, are connected together, and obviously when there is a patriarchal projection on this, suddenly there is, the virgin or the whore, and in between, where is the glorious sexual woman, completely wonderful, non-existent, cannot exist even, it's like a scary thing, So what about modernity? Can it take us somewhere else there?
Okay, difficult questions. We have to work hard. Obviously, Platonism and Christianity are to blame. Let's blame a few schools of thought, but it came together with the church fathers, and then especially the successful Christian thinkers who did very good things, by the way, in some respects, but not so much when it comes to the emancipation of, for example, women. So think of Thomas Aquinas and the very official Christian dogma, Roman Catholic dogma of the Holy Trinity, and it's always a triangle. You have the Father, you have the Son, you have the Holy Ghost. In fact, in the 4th century, they had a lot of debates amongst each other, these patriarchs. Shall we call the Holy Ghost a female ghost, like anima? They said, no, nothing feminine here. So only the Father, the Son, and it must be a spiritus, must be a masculine principle of spirituality. And that is holy. And then if that is holy, then what is not holy? So that differs very much from the pre-Christian mythological pantheon, the holistic one that you like in the particular myth. Because if only the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost are to be worshipped, because holy and eternal plus light, and they're above, and they don't have a body even, and they do not do anything sexual, and they are not animals, they don't do anything with vegetation, etc. Everything, the exact opposite of this Holy Trinity is then evil. So what is that? That can be the feminine, can be something that is the opposite of God, that is the devil. And what does the devil look like? God is a very old white male with a white beard, and he's very much above on the clouds in the light. So devilish is then the opposite. If you are a bit dark, perhaps, or you know what the devil looks like. Unredeemed bestiality. He has these horns. He has hooves. Can be reddish, sexual, unredeemed sexuality. Doesn't live above the clouds. He lives below the ground in hell. So the exact opposite is then completely wrong and immoral, and you should stay away from it. You can project it on other people. So the feminine is not divine, and evil is not divine, and vegetation is not divine, and animals are not divine, and matter is not divine. So working with your hands was not seen as something good either in Christianity for hundreds of years. Now, the feminine is a little bit in between here, because there is a halfway divine figure, the Mother Virgin, but that is, first of all, not very divine, and secondly, it's not complete, because she is a mother and a virgin, two nice roles, but obviously, not an old woman, and she's not a sexual creature. So this is then projected on the unholy women. So then you have this fantasy. Now the exact opposite of the Trinity is then the fantasy of the devil having sexual intercourse with witches somewhere in dark places and with goats or something. The people are completely crazy. This is and they liked it, and honestly they painted it sometimes, and it's this is scandalous, and they painted a lot, but that's all funny, but it's not funny obviously if the projector falls on you, because it means indeed that there must be in the outside world good women, there are mothers and virgins, difficult to combine, by the way, and so if someone doesn't fit the bill, then this is then the bad woman. That could be the old woman who doesn't obey so easily what is told her, etc. So this is a long history of emancipation of anything that was unjustifiedly excluded from the system, and we still suffer from it, not just women, but especially animals, I would say. They are not seen as divine in Christianity, nor in Western society, post-Christian society. And the same with people far away. You can project devilish things on them if they don't look exactly as your paintings here in Europe, etc. So this is a long process, because, I'm repeating, I'm sorry, but I think with Platonic Christianity, very good things did it have, but it also was very one-sidedly oriented on only masculine values, and it was not holistic like the pre-Christian Persephone myth, because the holism here is, there is this hieros gamos, that is the holy union of opposites, fertilizing, it's under the ground, that is Hades and Persephone, and that is needed to be fertile afterwards. And sometimes life is shining on you, and sometimes it's not so good, but both belong to life, and this has to be repeated. It's not a final redemption. So the ideal of completeness is different from the ideal of only light and only spirituality. That's what I think.
Thank you so much, Professor. Actually, when we met in together, the three of us in Elefsina, it was extremely moving to go through the archaeological site. I really hope all of you will one day go to Elefsina. It was Capital for Culture last year, and it's just amazing for, at least for us women, I don't know for you men, but to see these gigantic statues of women priestess, you know, and performing probably sacred acts, and it's extremely overwhelming and just very beautiful. I think we've reached a stage where we might be able to open the floor to our guests, and we would love our Greek ambassadors who are really gracing our evening, maybe to react and give us a sound from Greece. That would be a great privilege for us.
So, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation and for this so interesting discussion, because it started, you know, with the painting, the space, and then we went to spirituality, feminine leadership. So it was so much information, so interesting, and Professor, really, it was so how can I say, not only interesting, you know, a little bit triggering, yeah, and touching.
Yes.
And you said about myths. So I said to my colleague, you said about what is true, what is
Meaningful.
Yes, meaningful. So in Greek, we have how do we say, verb, expression that we use, live your myth. That means, you know, we always say this because it's not true, but it's meaningful. So I said to my colleague, live your myth, this is what the professor now is saying, and we are using it a lot in our language. So, well, just thank you again for, it was so nice. Thank you, Hélène, for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Katarina.
Yes, and it was really a pleasure to be here and also see the paintings and the artworks of Ekaterina. We have the same name.
It's a Greek name, but Katerina.
Yeah,
Katerina's
it's a Christian name, not Greek name. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Katarina, dear ambassador. I mean, would anyone around our panel this evening would like to take the floor? I know Marina, who is very, very good into cinema, maybe, and you come from Italy, another Mediterranean country. So what would be your reaction, Mariana?
I was interested also in a symbol that is a symbol of pomegranates. And if we can have your opinion, your expertise on that, because it's a symbol of fertility and it's a symbol of women, and a lot of group of women that is inspired by feminism use the pomegranate. So if we can learn something from you about the pomegranate.
I would love to speak about the pomegranate. Not only because I love the fruit, but because there is, I mean, of course, it's at the heart of the myth of Persephone. But it's so interesting how in so many divine beliefs, pomegranate always arrives at some point. And of course, sometimes it's inherited from for instance, I was in Florence in November in the Uffizi, and I was following this guide. I mean, there was this couple that hired a guide, and I tagged along, and sometimes they looked at me a bit weird, but I try not to be too invasive. Anyway, and the guide was always showing all the pomegranate symbolism that was in all the Renaissance paintings, so deeply embedded in Christianity, and whether it was in Pedro la Francesca or in Botticelli, and also there is this painting of Botticelli, which is the La Vierge de la Grenade, the Virgin of the pomegranate, and it's the Virgin Mary holding baby Jesus, and baby Jesus is holding the pomegranate, and of course, I mean, what a better symbol of fertility than that. But again, I think I mean, you see it obviously in Greek mythology, the pomegranate, but then again, it always shifts. It remains a divine fruit. But sometimes its symbolism shifts. Katerina, what you? I mean, when you're in the creative process of pomegranates, how does it come to you?
So I think it's like a vision of unity. So because all these small seeds are connected together, it's this kind of symbol of holistic world, whereas matriarchate thinking was so familiar with. Nature and animals and plants and people, men and women, everybody was together. And I think this is kind of holistic image of a feminine world. I'm a lot in Spain, and in Spain, close to Elche, Dama de Elche was discovered, and she was one of the priestess of love and death. And her holy fruit was pomegranate, and nobody allowed to eat it because it's growing and will be ripe in November. And November is time of the scorpion, was kind of time of Persephone going down. It is like very, very connected to death. It's a fruit only reserved for the goddess who is living in underground. It's very, very interesting, yes.
You know, when you cut a pomegranate in half, there is a cross, right? And there is the four. I mean, the cross is a symbol of the union of opposites, and it's a horizontal and vertical line coming together, forming a center, forming a, I mean, it's kind of like a yin and a yang Western symbol in a way. And perhaps, I mean, again, I've never thought about this. The thought just popped in my head, but it's true when we see pomegranates, we always see them cut in half with the seeds, and we always see this like quaternity, and of course the quaternity, especially if we get into Jungian symbolism, we can go very far, but it does speak about completeness, and it does speak, I mean, not only, I mean, the four seasons, the four elements, there are so many aspects of existence that their completeness is embodied by the number 4. And so perhaps there's something.
I didn't do any real pomegranate research, I must admit, but I mean, it's very clear in any case, just at the first sight from a Jungian point of view, that would be a symbol of the self very easily, indeed for the reasons that you mentioned, but there are more symbols of the self. So the next question would be, but I'm not prepared to answer that, is why this symbol of the self and not another one? But it looks, for example, very much indeed like the fruits that the Great Mother, Cybele, or the Great Mother, Magna Mater, that is the feminine figure par excellence in Antiquity. She would have the cornucopia. She's a fertility goddess. She gives life and death, obviously, also destruction, and she has all these fruits, including pomegranates. But indeed, it's ordered from the inside. It has this division into 4 or a cross, and it's sweet, and it's this nice color, and it's a love fruit. So it must be very feminine, and the parallel with Jesus Christ is that Jesus is sometimes or quite often depicted not with a pomegranate but with a world sphere in his hand. So that is also a symbol of the self, but then perhaps the masculine version. But I would say that the pomegranate is a symbol of the self and very much connected to the Great Mother. And fun detail, I can tell you, that is a old, like 12th century statue of wood, made of wood, of the Holy Virgin Mother from the Rhineland. And she had this kind of fruit in her hand, perhaps not exactly pomegranate, but something edible, like an apple or something. And then the Spaniards came in Holland, and they saw that thing, and they thought it was blasphemous, so they took a saw and they took it off, and instead of it, because it's a fruit and it has seeds, indeed it's fertility, so that's not good. So they took it away, and they put a lily instead, so that it is chastity instead. So no magna mater, but must be just innocent flower, unsexual flower. Yeah, I think pomegranate is too sensual for them in any case. Yeah. Or
So, thank you so much, Mariette. Well, that I think we had a very interesting perspective on pomegranates.
First day of the year, sorry, to have always a pomegranate at the house, and the first person who is coming in the house on the 1st January, he has to break a pomegranate. So it opens, and this means happiness and wealth. Yeah, we still have this tradition in all Greek houses. We kept here.
Incredible.
But I'm thinking now that also in Iran they
Yes,
have
exactly, Persia,
the pomegranate. So you see that it's another culture, another civilization, huh?
Definitely.
So something, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a question. It's a good segue, by the way, for my question, because the professor, you talked about myth and culture; they are linked together. But if we learn about the world history and the different civilization, we can find the same type of myth across multiple civilizations also. So how do you, in this case, how do you link the two together? I mean, myth and culture, considering myths usually are inherited from other civilization, arranged to something local eventually, or linked with something local. So that is my question.
Yeah, that's a matter of gradation. Do you say that? Gradation. And namely, indeed, on a certain level, we are all humans and we understand each other. And for other things, you need to make more of an effort before you understand. So that's all there is to it. It's like reading a novel. For example, I read a novel from Japan. And I was told this is a relatively international style novel, so I could understand more or less, but I'm sure I understood less than a Japanese person reading the same novel. But it was interesting. And if I would live in Japan for 10 years, I would understand more of it. So it's just a matter of gradual differences. So on a certain level, we understand each other. And for other things, it helps if you know the history of a symbol in the cultural context. And had I known, I would have done a bit more homework here about pomegranate, because you can do comparative methodological studies, and indeed, for example, compare paintings about pomegranates, and do all kinds of homework, reading what the artist says about it, or in what context does the pomegranate pop up, and how does it pop up in myths. It's a very interesting aspect that it is apparently still, I think, a fruit of the Magna Mater, if this is what brings prosperity, etc. And you have to do that on the 1st of January. So that's really living myth. But in cold Holland, where I'm living, you don't do that. So it's good that I know this now. So that is what I mean, the cultural knowledge that it's not absolutely necessary, but it helps That's the idea.
To touch a little bit on the space part, one of the reasons that I sent those two paintings into space and created this whole process and project with Ekaterina and Elizabeth was not only because I wanted to, convey the psychological meaning behind the stories of Christ and Persephone in a new light, in a contemporary light, but also because I wanted to spark a reflection on the view that we have of space and the fact that we have a very scientific view of space. When I mean, generally in Western society, we regard it. I mean, when we think about space, we think about just trying to understand the physics, the mechanisms behind it, trying to see if we can set foot on other planets in case that there's an apocalypse and that we have to flee somewhere. And I think it's very important because we have a very different view of how space is regarded, the cosmos is regarded, and how the cosmos was regarded in ancient times. And I think it's really important to come back as well to myths that talk about the creation of the cosmos, that talk about, or not perhaps directly of the cosmos, but around deeper motivations that can explain why we're embarking on such a journey. I mean, of course, we're increasingly having the means to embark on these amazing journeys. But what is the meaning of this, and what are the motivations? And I think that there are various myths that can help us understand these motivations. I think one of them is the hero's journey, and venturing into the unknown. I mean, imagine the person who is already born that is going to be on a spaceship going to Mars, and who is going to be at some point with a team, and they're going to be the humans that have been the furthest away from Earth. Trying to put yourself in that position, being in that state of awe and the mysteriousness of reaching and going to Mars. But at some point, especially, it's a long way, and at some point, you don't see the Earth anymore, and you don't see Mars, and you're just in the vastness of nothingness. Obviously, there are stars, and there are things that you can see, but essentially, I think it's really interesting when we look at the hero's journey and also Persephone and going into the unknown and going to the underworld and because in a way, the cosmos and reaching that state of nothingness and darkness is comparable to going to the deeper parts of existence and the deeper parts of what surrounds us. And I think there is an unconscious motivation, I would say, that is this hero's journey. So I address the audience if they want to participate about this journey of embarking into discovering the cosmos.
My first education was actually mathematics, physics, and computer science. And I always wanted to discover the universe and find a question of the universe and the unity of the universe. And some point I decided we need actually art. We need art, we need some imagination, additionally just for the mathematician formula. And what you did actually, you combine these two wonderful things, science and imagination, art, together and brought to the cosmos. I think this is a wonderful answer, and giving us a lot of idea and inspiration, how it can be.
The going into space indeed can be as dark in the end as going into the underworld. So there's some similarity here. But in fact, the artworks were the pioneers in this case, and they came back on Earth safely, a little bit harmed, but that adds to their artistic value, I'm sure. But I'm very much a Jungian, and from a Jungian point of view, indeed, humans are pioneers. That's what humans are. We always want to go to the edge a little bit, beyond it, a little bit too much, always, then we get punished, and then but next time we go further. That's what we do. if it's really too far, then it is hubris. So the thing is, indeed, if we do these things, we should not forget, indeed, that we are human. We should have our artists and have a narrative about it. Because if you do more than you can actually process, then life becomes meaningless, and then it is just atoms, and you don't know what you are doing it for. So it is. We should try to do a little bit more than we can, a little bit, and then process it and do it again. But there's always the danger that we go too far. Yeah, that's what I would think. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. So reacting on the cosmos and art, obviously, when you project these two words, for me, there triggers horoscope. So I would love to know how the Greek have the Greek created the horoscope. I mean, this, it's more than myth. It is this whole story of all the stars influencing the life on Earth with the whole planetarium cosmology there. So I don't know much about it, but I'd love to know more. So that's the first thing. They don't know so much. No? Maybe you want to react on that? There's a microphone here.
Sorry, I don't think this is the right question to ask. I don't think the horoscope was invented by Greek, so we cannot say many things. But given the chance, I would like to tell to the artist that when you said now that you've studied maths and physics, and I realized that what I saw in your paintings was a very symmetrical thing, and that I could not imagine, but now, I can combine it. And just another thing, and probably we should leave, sorry, that it's all about the eternal question of life and death, and that's why all the conversation is so interesting today. And I think that some people can answer it by religious, some people can answer it by mythology, and some people can answer it in art, and I choose art, and thank you so much.
Really beautiful. Thank you so much for the comment. We have another question there triggered.
Thank you so much for this interesting discussion. My kind of tangent to all of this is kind of how does artificial intelligence play a role into like mythos or psychology or the themes we talked about today, because you have humans creating this thing which acts like a human that some envision might replace humans. So kind of how does this play into this whole broader conversation? Thank you.
Fascinating, Professor. AI, art.
Okay, what shall we say now? No, the thing is, thinking of Greece and the great Greek thinkers such as Thales of Miletus or Anaximander, people very much influenced by the Babylonians. Indeed, the horoscope and the zodiac comes from them. But they studied mathematics and astronomy and all these things, but it was to them very holistic. They didn't use the word holistic because it didn't exist, but to them it was just in a meaningful framework, and they called it divine, etc. And so they were very clever and very mathematical and very astronomical, but it was embedded in meaningfulness. And my fear is with the chat bot that my students use all the time, that it is not meaningful at all, because it's just random. And like some misunderstood forms of postmodernism sometimes is also randomness as an ideal. And as a Jungian, that's not something I would like, I mean, obviously it is there, and if it's there, it will never go away, not by itself. We can't do anything about it anymore, so you have to deal with it. But I would, or it worries me a little bit, or it will be an effort for humanity not to lose our sense of meaningfulness if things go that easily, as if it is human, as if it has soul, but it hasn't. So I think it's in fact very different from an artist who makes something with his or her lifeblood. Is, I think, very different from just recycling things in a random way, even though it may seem meaningful. But that's what I think, but I'm not an AI expert. Yeah.
I just wanted to bounce a little bit about the cosmos and meaningfulness and art. Obviously, you mentioned The Little Prince, you know, the old-time story. Has it become a myth? I don't know, but it's true that the Little Prince visits many planets. There's Antoine de Saint-Exupéry takes us in his very much as an aviator, an explorator, you know, or an explorer of another dimension, able to see the planet Earth from above, you know, having this vision of humanity as being a whole family together with no separation. That's very interesting to have the perspective of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry on the cosmos, teaching us a lesson of humanity. Because of taking this kind of eagle eye perspective, you know, that you can, and that's what you've tried to do. You've taken this art up above the planet Earth and trying to get a lesson from it, you know, that there is this desire to elevate oneself, to become more wise and not to burn oneself like Icarus or Icar. So I think it's very, very interesting, all the lessons of wisdom we get from that conte, or that has it become a myth? You know, The Little Prince is the most translated book in the whole world after the religious books, obviously, and it's still the most incredible kind of, you know, narration for humanity, The Little Prince or The Little Princess, whatever. But there is much to say about that, and I thank you for being, in your own way, Stanislas, a little prince. That's what you're doing here. Any reaction from the audience? We are about to wrap this round table. It's almost 8:30, and we've had a very rich conversation, so we don't want to exhaust you either, but if there is a last question from the audience, we're very happy to take it.
When you were talking about zodiac signs or horoscope, Hermanès in Damien, in the preface, he said something along the lines that you are the concentration in one point of the universe, and horoscopes, and especially like a zodiac chart, is basically the map of the sky when you were born. So I think it's somehow very relevant and spiritual, and like it can be, I think, very insightful in like who you are and the being, etc. I just wanted to add that about the zodiac.
Yes, thank you so much. I don't know, Professor, if there is final remark.
I fully agree. I think the zodiac really encompasses all our instincts, and except perhaps for the Libra, but I mean these are old symbols, and they are still valid. So it's also providing a meaningful a framework of meaningfulness. Yeah.
So it's time probably for a conclusion, Stanislas. It's time for us to thank you so much to have brought so much meaningfulness to this noble establishment tonight. We would like to thank also our team, namely Caliste Adou, who bears a beautiful Greek name herself. We thank all our team, Laurent Bougnot here, who has been screening and taping everything. Want to thank Nina Vonk, also part of our team, and Raphaël Vela, also. Laura Durand is part of our team as well, but I really want to thank absolutely everyone, thanking our beautiful artist, Ekaterina. Thank you so much. It's such an honor and a privilege that your work is gracing our walls. They are on 2 floors, so please wander through the house before you go, because I love the gem paintings that are on the 2nd floor. Very beautiful feminine figures wrapped in gold and different colors. So please venture through the house before you go. We're happy to offer you a little drink also before you go. We want to thank Professor. It's been a huge honor to have your wisdom and your light being cast on such an incredible adventure between cosmos art, between Stanislas and different artists. Our souls also go to Elizabeth, who is the French painter, who is also having her art being here. All the Christian paintings are from her. So please enjoy during this April month, the month of renewal, of spring, these very, springy, let's say, art on our walls. Thank you so much, Stanislas. And I so look forward to meeting you again in Elefsina.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Of course. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, Hélène, thank you so much for hosting this event here at the Alliance Française. I'm very grateful for Ekaterina and Marietje of your presence as well in this panel, and Hélène obviously as well. I think we really had such a meaningful conversation, and I think we should have more of them. Yeah. I think we should have more of them, and hopefully the next one in Elefsina. Thank you.